Well, my next guest may have seemingly come out of nowhere. Certainly did for me. I have to admit, I wasn't aware of Dr. Aseem Malhotra's incredible work over the previous 10 years before he was on a seminal interview on the BBC. We're going to ask him about that and a whole lot more, including his upcoming trip to Australia right now. Dr. Aseem Malhotra, thank you so much for joining us.
Delighted to speak to you, Topher.
Well, I have to... I've only been learning about you recently, and I feel a little bit embarrassed about that because you've got an incredible history. You're an NHS, NIH-trained cardiologist. You've been to Australia twice before, somehow passed me by completely, and you were famously now invited onto the BBC to speak about excess deaths and what may be related to heart conditions and so forth with excess deaths. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and why the BBC invited you on as the expert to talk about cardiology, heart health, and these excess deaths?
Yeah, absolutely, Topher. So I'm a practicing cardiologist. I've been a qualified doctor for well over 20 years. In the last 10 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, I have been really very much involved in public health activism. I've been campaigning on two big issues. One is the obesity epidemic and trying to understand the root cause of it, and then give people solutions. And also something I've been very heavily involved with for many years is exposing the excesses and manipulations of the drug industry and trying to promote what I would describe as ethical, evidence-based medical practice. So that was my background. And then I've done through that activism work, a lot of what I see as a part of that success is trying to get information out to the public.
Sure.
And obviously mainstream media is a great platform for that. That has a potential to reach millions of people. I've written for practically every single newspaper in the UK. I've featured and been on many BBC News stories that I have basically created because of my medical journal academic publications on issues such as sugar or saturated fat or statins or low-carb diets, everything really coming back to heart disease. So the BBC actually asked me in January to go on because there had, in the previous few weeks, there had been some guidance that was coming out. Initially, Chief Medical Officer suggested that more people need to take statin drugs to combat heart disease, and it may well have been a reduction in uptake of statins during lockdown, which may be leading to excess heart attacks. But that was proven to be completely false. So the BBC had asked me to comment on this, and during that interview, I actually said, listen, the elephant in the room here is we're ignoring something which is much more concerning. That is the fact that we have very clear, high-quality evidence now linking the COVID mRNA vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna in particular, to heart attacks and myocarditis and heart issues, and is likely a significant contributory factor to the fact that we have a big issue in many countries around the world now of excess deaths, which are to a large degree unexplained. And from my perspective, one clear bit of evidence that shows it must be a factor by far is the vaccines.
Look, it is incredible to think that there was so much fascination about a single COVID death not so long ago, and now we have, last I checked, and my data is a few months out of date, but last I looked at it, 16% thereabouts excess deaths happening in Australia right now, and a complete lack of curiosity from the powers that be as to what might be contributing to that. And of course, when someone like yourself comes forward with, not that my opinion matters, but I tend to agree. What I've seen is very compelling evidence making it possible or even likely that there is a contributing factor there, and yet there's this complete lack of curiosity. It's quite incredible. So, Doctor, a lot of the censorship has been focused, at least superficially, around the claims around the 30,000 excess deaths as a result of heart conditions and heart-related issues in the UK. But of course, for you, this is intrinsically tied up with the story of your own father's passing in 2021. You had, I can't imagine how difficult this would be, but you had the task of actually looking at your own father's autopsy, and you released a report on that's been peer-reviewed, in which you concluded that the mRNA vaccines contributed to his death. How does it feel now to have the professional and the personal and to see the censorship of what is really such a personal story for you?
To be honest, Topher, it's to be expected as well. I mean, in my opinion, fact.org or fact checkers or whatever else are really written by psychopaths for psychopaths. And I'll expand on that in a second. But coming back to my paper, it was published in the peer-reviewed International Journal of Insulin Resistance. It was a 10,000-word piece, 2 parts, because I could walk people through the whole process of the fact that even myself, being empathetic to people that are still, unfortunately, indoctrinated around the safety of the COVID vaccines, I was one of those people. I was completely indoctrinated into thinking this would be safe and effective. I did not expect or think that vaccine could do so much harm. And part of that story, of course, is my dad's own case study, again, which went through peer review and was accepted by the peer reviews as being reasonable in the sense that I suggested that likely cause of his death or primary precipitating factor was a COVID mRNA vaccine. That's something that I have probably led on in the world in actually making the link between how the mRNA vaccines can what we call accelerate coronary artery disease. And the reason I was able to do that is because I myself have been at the forefront of changing the understanding of heart disease. I published a paper with two internationally renowned cardiologists in 2017 in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, where we describe coronary artery disease as being a chronic inflammatory condition that can be helped by lifestyle changes. So there's very few people probably in the world that was able to understand that, and then also, in addition, speak out about it. That put me in a very unique position, and I had to then act upon it, and that's what happened through the journal.
Yeah. Look, it's a difficult position to be in. What are you finding is the reaction now from your own colleagues, your own other people in your own profession? Are you finding yourself marginalised and rejected at that professional level as well, or are they showing at least more curiosity and more willing to consider what you've got to say?
To be honest, the shift is only going in one direction, Topher, and that is that more and more doctors, cardiologists are aware that there is an issue. But the problem is most of them are scared to speak out because the system, unfortunately, doesn't encourage that safety of speaking the truth. So they've been privately messaging me, telling me they support me, telling me to keep going. But they themselves, I had a conversation with a very senior cardiologist in the NHS yesterday. And he said to me, Aseem, the problem we've got is, doctors are in a position where they have to choose between their patient and their career. That's where we've got to. And they're choosing their career or their self-interest over the patient because they are scared. So we have to have an honest conversation about that, and try and make sure that we address this at the root cause, these system failures. And the reason I said psychopath, Topher, is that I've come up with this new term, which is actually referenced in The Lancet by Richard Horton, the editor-in-chief of The Lancet, who came to one of my talks in London. And it's called the psychopathic determinants of health. What does that mean? Big, powerful corporations who are only interested in profit, not giving you the best treatment, in this case, big pharma, often as legal entities behave in a psychopathic way in order to make money. But the problem is they have got control over regulators, over academic institutions, over medical journals, and they've got more power than they've ever had. So when we address this and understand it at its root, we can then unravel all of these issues that are going on at the moment and get to a greater truth. And that's what we want to do. Well,
Doctor, I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat. I'm looking forward to meeting you when you come here into Australia. Now, the Australian Medical Practitioner Society has brought you out for a speaking tour. I'm very, very excited about this. I've got their website here where they are, tickets are available on sale right now. I'm actually going to be emceeing your event in Perth, which I'm really looking forward to. I've been invited to head across there and to MC 2,500 seat event at the Perth Convention Centre on June the 10th. But of course, all the other dates are on the AMPS website as well. What is your main message that you're bringing to the world now? You've talked about the fact that you've been trying to talk to the world for over 10 years on these issues. What's the message that you're bringing to us in Australia?
To be honest, Topher, really the simple principle that I'm trying to promote here is ethical evidence-based medical practice. That's something that is very much at the heart of AMPS, has invited me to come and speak in Australia, the Australian Medical Professional Society. Very courageous doctors and nurses, other healthcare practitioners who decided that they did not want to take the vaccine. And unfortunately, they lost their jobs because of it, many of these people. And it's absolutely, it's criminal. And I think people need to understand the truth of what's really going on. And, that is the solution to get us out of this place we're in right now, which is something that I would only describe as being in hell. I mean, people's mental and physical health is deteriorating. And part of the solution to that problem is getting information to people in a transparent and open way, free from commercial influence, and reforming the system. This is a system failure that has been creeping up on us for a couple of decades and is now, resulting in a complete meltdown of healthcare in many parts of the world. So that's really what I want to be talking about in my tour and offering meaningful solutions to the problems as well. And what does that mean? Ultimately, removing conflicts of interest over health.
Well, Dr.
policy.
Aseem Malhotra, thank you so much for this interview. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I do look forward to hanging out with you in Perth and possibly in one or two other cities as well as you tour around Australia. Thank you so much for your time today. We'll put the link for the tickets to see Dr. Malhotra in Australia into the show notes. Dr. Malhotra, thank you so much for your time.